Okay, Shabbat Shalom. Shalom. We are going to be looking at a few verses, few scriptures this week, dealing with the tabernacle. Both, dealing with the earthly tabernacle as well as the heavenly tabernacle. I think probably we'll just go through some key verses within all of these different texts, as opposed to reading all of them through. And hopefully who's ever here can have some additions or questions or comments in regards to the readings. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at is Exodus 25. Is it the whole chapter 26? No, it's 25, all 25 and 26 up to verse 30. Isaiah 66, I believe that's the whole chapter of Isaiah 66. And the 9th chapter of Hebrews. All dealing with, one way or another, the tabernacle of Yahweh, whether we're talking about the whether we're talking about the whether you're talking about, again, the natural tabernacle or the tabernacle in the heavens. Mm-hmm. Okay, so to begin, I guess we can look at, I do want to read a few of these verses. We'll look at just to begin, Exodus 25, and we can read actually there 1 through 8. 1 through 8 is good. You want to read that?
Verses 1 through 8?
Yeah.
I'll read 25.
25, 1 through 8, yeah.
Yahweh spoke unto Moses, saying, tell the sons of Israel to raise a contribution for me from every man whose heart moves in him. You shall raise my contribution. And this is the contribution which you are to raise from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet material, fine linen, goat hair, ram skins, dyed red, porpoise skins, acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for the anointing oil and for the fragrant incense, onyx stones and setting stones for the ephod and for the breastpiece, and let them construct a sanctuary for me, that I may dwell among them.
Okay, so first of all, when we think about the construction of the tabernacle, it gets us to kind of the place and understanding of the plan of Yahweh in terms of him getting back to the original plan. When we look back to Bereshit, we look back to Genesis, and we see what the kind of what the layout was for for man originally, prior to sin, we see that Yahweh dwelt among his creation. There was a purity that was involved, you know, because of the newness, and the fact that there, you know, man was in this state of newness and pureness.
Adam.
Yeah, just
Before-
original
Before he
before the fall. We're talking. And Yahweh dwelt, you know, with Adam and Hava in the garden. But then, of course, sin came into the picture, and man had to be removed from the presence of Yahweh. There were, you know, sin caused a separation in the relationship. So, moving forward, the steps began to be made so that Yahweh can once again dwell with his people. And we see now kind of the, I don't want to say the beginning stages, because it really started back with Abraham to get to where we are here in Exodus. But we we see the process kind of being solidified in terms of you know, with Israel being called out, this called out nation, and you know, they're given this code, this way of life, this covenant is made, and now we're getting to the place where Yahweh will dwell is being created. So when we look at verse 2, which says, speak to the sons of Israel, and let them take for me a portion. Let them take for me a portion or an offering. I think it says in contribution, portion,
heave offering.
The King James uses the word offering. The Hebrew is terumah. Terumah, which looks like this in the Hebrew. Terumah, which is a present. Let's say a sacrifice. Just incidentally, I just heard yesterday somebody said that this word is pagan.
What word? Sacrifice?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's of no consequence, but I don't know how to spell. You spell sacrifice. It sounds like sacrifice, don't it? All right. Looks weird that way. Okay, so the word terumah, which is translated as offering or contribution or portion in some places, a tribute, a gift, a heave offering. Heave offering. When we look at terumah in the context of a heave offering, it takes us back to the root of the word here, which is what we find inside here, this room, this resh, this vav, and this mem, which is the root of the word, which means to be high, to bring up, to exalt, to set up. So when we talk about a heave offering, you know, it's like kind of Oh, like what we do with the etrog and the lulav on tabernacles, or what we do with the bread
Wave
on,
offering.
huh?
Bread on Shavuot.
Yeah, what we do with the bread on Shavuot, the heave offering is just that. It's like a wave offering where you're lifting up, you're giving up to Yahweh. Kind of in that, kind of that heaving, that lifting up motion. When you think about a heave, it's something that comes up from within, right? The only way I could think about it is kind of a nasty way to think about it, but you know what happens when you heave, right? It kind of comes from inside of you, from the inside out. So in terms of these offerings here, that's what he's asking for, that terumah, that portion which is a present, which is a gift, but it's not only a gift, it's a gift, from the inside, from your strength. And then it even goes on to say, is telling you to continue on in verse 2, from every man whose heart motivates him, he shall raise my contributions. So if you didn't understand that this portion was this idea of, if there wasn't a lifting involved, as it continues on, with describing what's going on here, it just kind of defines it here. From every man whose heart motivates him, he shall raise my contributions. So it's looking for these contributions which are specified. He tells you what he wants exactly, in terms of the gold and the silver and the bronze and the blue and the purple and the scarlet material, the fine linen. He breaks it all down what he wants. But in terms of quantities, is however much you want to get, like what your heart tells you to get. If your heart is telling you just to give a little bit, that's what you're giving, right? But
or if you have a little bit.
Well, they came out on top, I would say. You know what I mean? After they borrowed, from Exodus,
and keep that.
Well, I'm saying that the command was about you giving
out of your heart,
from your heart. It's easy to say, well, I need 7 bushels of this and 10 ephah of that. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's easy to sit up here and say how much to give, but it makes it different when people are given according to what their heart is telling for them to give. You know what value. You're always asking the people to put a value on Yahweh's will. He's asking for the people to put a value on Yahweh's will, and then give according to that value that they set right in their own hearts. Right?
I kind of see that as how we're not we don't necessarily believe that people have to tithe, quote unquote, a tenth of their money. However, when people are being generous, it's they see a need and they meet that need or whatever, and it doesn't even have to be a monetary thing. It could be they see you need something, you might need some markers, or like Ebony gave us markers last week, or what I mean? It's like there's wherever there's a need, people step in to help meet those needs, and it's not something that you gotta necessarily beat out of them. They are, if their heart is for Yah and they see a need within the body, they're gonna go ahead and meet that need.
Right.
So y'all need the tabernacle. There he says he's going.
Right.
He wants the tabernacle. And I guess the people are going to come up and meet that need without it being like, give such and such amount or percent or whatever.
Exactly. So again, we see that Yahweh he gives the ingredients, he gives the actual parts and things that he wants. He says, I want this particular thing, that particular thing. But he leaves it up to the people to give from their heart, those, the various different things. When we think about how this kind of relates to what our relationship with Yahweh should be, is exactly that. We have to be able to not just be doing things, like, because if everybody would have just given, say a little bit, right? And they get to the end and they don't have enough to even do what they want, or like say the bare minimum is given, right? They wouldn't have ended up getting to the place where they was able to have what they needed in order to get the thing done. When we think about, I guess there's a bare minimum that you can do in terms of living for Yahweh, right? I don't know what that is necessarily. I guess there could be a bare minimum that you could do.
Somebody is trying to figure out what the bare minimum is they got to do.
I guess there are people that are doing that. I guess there are people that live their life like that. But when you even just to think about it, like it just seems it's wrong. It's out of order. You know what I mean? You can't really just get through this life trying to figure out, what is the least thing that I can do. It's just a wrong kind of attitude to have. So I think that's just a picture of something that we see here, in this. And again, I don't know. I don't think I mentioned, but as we're going through, of course, we'll be talking about the tabernacle. Looking at the parts inside the tabernacle, we'll be seeing, types and shadows of Yeshua within the implements of the tabernacle, and also dealing with as a whole dwelling with Yahweh and the different things that he has set up. To set the parameters for how we would dwell with him. Okay, so verse 8 and 9 of chapter 25 say, and let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show thee, after the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall you make it. It's interesting when you look at some of the different commentaries in regards to this verse, talking about the pattern of the tabernacle. Quite a few of the kind of prominent commentators look at this and kind of deny the idea that the pattern was something that came from the heavenlies per se.
They think it came from Earth?
Well, I guess the idea is that there was this thing that Yahweh, this pattern that Yahweh came up with, but not necessarily that it was something that was kind of something that was typified of something from the heavens.
Oh, I understand.
As if to say, there's not, just because Yahweh gave Moses a pattern, it doesn't necessarily mean that the pattern was something that had previously existed
even though
in the heavens.
And they said that even though Moses said, he said something like that, he saw, you know.
Yeah, but even still, you could make the argument that Yahweh made a pattern that Moses did see. You know what I mean? But it's not necessarily meaning that he saw something that was in the heavens. Me, actually, I don't necessarily subscribe to, here, put something underneath of that bottle. I don't think that way myself, because of the fact that I think that throughout Scripture we see various different types and shadows which kind of point us towards the direction of Yeshua. So I think that the idea of, well, there's other things that we'll see later to kind of verify what I'm saying now, but it seems that in general, when we look at Scripture, you know, there's always these pictures of things that point us towards Yeshua and towards the heavenlies. So why, in this case, would there be any difference? Do we say that there's a box and rooms in the heavenlies? You know what I mean? Maybe not, but these things do represent something that is indeed in the heavenlies. You know, for us to look at, to get that better understanding.
It might be a physical representation of spiritual things.
I would say that's exactly what it is a physical representation of spiritual things, because when we look at Torah in general, that's what Torah is. It's a physical representation of spiritual things, right? Yahweh's laws, statutes, and commandments are essentially the character of Yahweh humanized. And so this is a perfect example of that, in terms of Yahweh showing Moses this physical representation of the heavenlies, and you know what he is to be building on earth to represent that that pattern. Okay, so I want to break down this word pattern. This word pattern, is it? Verse 8. Oh, the King James does say pattern. Okay, so
mine doesn't say pattern till verse 9. Pattern of all its
yeah, you're right. There's no, it is verse 9. Okay, I'm gonna put this up here, over here. We want to look at this word pattern, because I think that there's some things that we can see inside of here, inside of this word. So we're talking about pattern. So in the Hebrew, it's tabnit. Tabnit. It looks like this. Tabnit. Neat. So it means model. It means resemblance. Resemblance. Figure. To pattern. Similitude. Similitude. Again, we can have this idea of this being a resemblance of something that Yahweh made just for the purposes of what Moses was doing. But I like to think based on the fact that I think that within Yahweh's word, he continuously shows us things in the physical that give us a picture of the spiritual. And again, like I said, we'll see later on proof that there is this spiritual foundation where it starts. So when we look at this, it is really a model of the heavenlies, or a resemblance, or some figure, or some similitude of something that we're looking to in the heavens, right? This tabnit. Now, interestingly enough, this word tabnit, the root of that is banah. Banah, which looks like this. The root is banah, which means to build. Means to build. Means to build. To set up, to make. And also to obtain children. That's interesting. It seems out of place. I mean, but it's not, right? Because when you look at this, I don't think I write this big.
That's right.
Okay, so when we look at this thing that's patterned, the root of it being banah, which is to build, and we can see that building and setting up. If this is the plan for the house, or the house plan, or the tent plan, and the continuation, which is the noon, the date, and the noon, and the hay. We can see obtaining children. You build your house. You build your house with children. We can see that, right? But it's interesting that this word here, now, this word here is, when you look at it, it's from a Hebrew perspective, it's phonetically close to the word that means
Knowledge. Wisdom.
That means understanding.
Understanding. I gave all the words. Binah.
Enoch, which would look like if you put a yod there, you may be not, which is understanding. Right? So if you're adding this arm, this work, or this thing that you use, for strength in the middle of this building or this setting up or this making up thing, it turns it into understanding. Right? But all of this is coming from this pattern that Yahweh has given to Moses to build the tabernacle. So if we're taking this word that he uses, the thing that he's shown to Moses, this pattern, we can really break that thing down and not be too far-fetched when we think about that concept of Yahweh giving to Moses this understanding, this knowledge, this wisdom of the heavenlies, and transforming it into something on earth to not only represent the heavenlies, but to literally be the representation on earth of the heavenlies. And when they do this, when they follow this all the way to the end, Yahweh does indeed dwell, within this tabernacle. But it all begins with the understanding that Yahweh gives to Moses in order to follow these plans out. Right? This pattern that he gives to Moses is understanding. The pattern that he gives to Moses is indeed understanding. Yahweh had a pattern. And the tabernacle is a pattern of the heavenlies. We are able to look at this thing and see a representation of where the Most High is, if we could say that he is somewhere, right? A representation of where he is. And also, we also can learn through this in different ways. We can learn who he is, and also how he deals with us, right? We're able to see a picture of where he is. We're able to see a picture of who he is, and we're able to see a picture of how he wants to deal with us all through the tabernacle, right? So again, if we're able to learn all of those things, it's giving us what? It's giving us an understanding. It's giving us an understanding of who Yahweh is. It's not a total understanding. We can't look at him and know everything about him just by looking at that. But we are able, yes, to gain a good understanding of who Yahweh is through the pattern of the tabernacle. Okay, does anybody have any thoughts about any of that before we move forward?
I guess just that it would have to be to me, it would have to be a physical vision that Moses had, because anytime you use a pattern to do something, it's something that you physically see.
That's true.
or have, or
that is true. But for instance, I think the argument is that, say for instance, if I want to build a house, I can conceptualize how I want the house to be, and then draw it out, and then I give that drawing to whoever I'm going to have building it, and and it'll go based off of this pattern that I've created. So the argument is, I don't follow this, but I'm just saying, the argument is that Yahweh just showed he did show him something, but not necessarily. And to me, I don't understand. I don't understand the thought process, but this is what the thought process is that it's not a picture necessarily of a tabernacle in the heavenlies, just something that Yahweh created, and then Moses, followed through with the instructions of the pattern that he was shown. I agree. To me, it doesn't. It only makes sense. And there's New Testament revelation that shows us that it was indeed a
physical. I mean, I don't want to say physical, but spiritual or whatever. But it was something that existed before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so that being said, let's look at verse 10 and look at some of the. Let's see. Wait a second. We look back. Let me just look back real quick. It's asking for the. Oh, it don't ask for the wood, huh? It don't ask for the wood. In verses 1 through 7. Gold, silver, bronze, blue, purple, scarlet, fine linen, goat hair, skins. Oh, yes, it does. Okay, good. All right, so looking at the tabernacle, it begins with the instructions from the inside out. When we look at verses 10 through 22, is dealing with the ark, the construction of the ark, which literally means box or ark or chest, or it also can mean coffin. It was this box that was made. So they constructed this box of acacia wood, which in the King James it says shittim wood, which when you look that up, that is kind of a description of the wood, and it seems as if the definers are describing this as this acacia tree, which is a type of tree that fits the characteristics of this shittim wood here that it's describing. This apparently was a very durable type of wood, but nevertheless, as durable as it was, it's still wood. It's still something that decays. When we look at the construction of the tabernacle, it's interesting that the actual the ark itself, it's interesting that the ark itself wasn't something that was pure gold.
Like it was overlaid in gold.
It was wood that was overlaid in gold. The box itself, which is an interesting thing, because there are parts too, as we'll see, there's parts to some of these implements that are indeed pure gold, but here the box, the thing that's in the midst of the kind of the most holiest part of the whole situation, and it is something that's made of wood and then overlaid with gold, which is something that I find interesting. Okay, so again, so they take this acacia wood, they make this box overlaid with this gold, and then on top of this box is the mercy seat, which it says in verse 17, you shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. So the actual mercy seat, that the lid to the box, that was pure gold. It was the lid for which the word actually means lid, a lid, or mercy seat. That word is kaporet, which is a derivative of the word kafar, which is where we get Yom Kippur, or Yom Kippur is Day of Atonement. The word for mercy seat is a derivative of the word far, which means to cover, but not just to cover as if to take something and to cover it up, but to to atone or to expiate or to placate or to satisfy a debt, to disannul, forgive, to pardon. So when we thinking about what the mercy seat represents, when we think about this box, we have this box that's overlaid with gold, and this pure gold that's placed on top. This pure gold that's placed on top that represents not only just a covering of the box, right, but it's bringing that idea of expiation or canceling of debts or atonement or forgiveness, right? So we have this place where Yahweh dwells. That, first of all, you have this wood that has been now fortified with this pure gold. And then on top of the box that's been fortified with pure gold, you have a lid which is pure gold, which typifies forgiveness or this annulment or atonement or expiation. To me, it's easy to look at this and see a picture of not only Yeshua, but also looking at the new covenant, where Yahweh literally dwells in his people who are again housed in this perishable flesh, just like the perishable acacia wood, right? That is kind of purified and made to be able to be preserved by being covered by this pure gold. When you think about, again, this word pure, where it talks about the gold, pure is tehor, which means clean or pure, whether it's talking about physical or ceremonial or in a moral sense. When we talk about clean and unclean, we're talking about tameh or tehor. This word here that's translated as pure, to be bright, to be clean, to be clear. It's giving you that picture of light, something that's uncontaminated, something that is clean and cleansed. When we think about pure gold, again, we talked about this idea last week of, when we find gold in its natural state, it's something that, is intermixed with impurities. So this here, pure, this tehor, is the idea of removing all of the impurities from a thing and making it clean, making it pure, making it clear. When we get a picture of the heavenlies, it's interesting when we think about the streets of gold. They're clear.
That's restored.
They're clear, right? But it's because of, it's giving you this idea of tehor, of clearness, of cleanness, of pureness, right? So again, we have this box, this container that's going to be the place where Yahweh dwells. That over it is this pure gold that is overlaid with, and then on top of it, the mercy seat, which is part of the box that goes on top of the box, is all gold, pure gold, which again signifies the idea of not just being a lid but a covering, which, by the way, is what Yeshua is for us, right? Is that covering for us in terms of our sin, right? That atonement, that reconciliation, that forgiveness of the sins. So when we look at the fact that Yeshua, came into this sinful flesh and lived and died and rose again and went back to the Father and sent back his Holy Spirit. But, the process included coming into this existence. We see a picture of that when we look at the tabernacle, where the tabernacle is a mixture. It's a mixture of the perishable and the non-perishable, right? It's a mixture of that which is pure and something that lasts essentially forever, and this other thing that perishes and dies. So we can see a picture then of Yeshua, who is the one that provides for us the forgiveness of sin and the placation of Yahweh's wrath towards us. And remember the fact that in the flesh, he was indeed in the flesh. He came and became, this perishable entity, right? But yet it's still in him dwelled the fullness of the Spirit. So when we look at what the tabernacle represents, the very place where Yahweh's Spirit dwelled in its fullness, we see that picture right there, where the fullness of the presence of Yahweh dwelt on this box, that was made out of wood, but yet overlaid in gold and then covered with.
I think about
mercy.
the pure gold, and we were talking about the tahor and removing the impurities. And Isaiah talks about him taking upon himself the diseases and the sicknesses and all that, and the sins of the people. So it's kind of like that whole. I mean, he was pure, but he also makes pure, removes impurity.
Yes. Right, and we see that process in the mercy seat. The mercy seat is a picture of forgiveness, of the appeasing of the wrath. So it takes away that which will cause Yahweh to bring his wrath upon the people. Right? So yeah, we definitely see that there in that idea there. Right, so it's easy then to see Yeshua in the actual ark. Again, because of all that we just looked at in terms of that. The next thing that it describes inside of the most holy place is the table. The table, which again is made of acacia wood and overlaid in pure gold. So it gives you kind of the little breakdown as to what
this is out. This is in the holy place.
The most holy place. Oh wait.
This is the table.
The most holy place is outside of the veil.
Yeah.
So inside of the veil is the ark up here. Draw my little picture here. Okay, so we got the ark. Inside the most holy place. And so the table, well, I think this is, so that's west. Is this a north side? That's west.
No, north is on the other side.
Okay, I'll be over here. So the table, it says, it tells you what side the table was on. It'll tell you at the end or in the middle. All right, I'll look as I go. I can't remember which side it's on. We'll say it's on the north side. Table. There's always bread on the table. 2 stacks of 6. Which it don't tell you that in these verses, but it just tells you about the bread being ever present on the table. So it's made of. You shall set the bread of the presence on the table before me at all times. So the showbread the showbread on the table. So they typically refer to the table as a table of showbread because it has on it the bread that is also, this picture of an offering to Yahweh. Showbread, we look at this showbread, it literally means bread of the face. It really means bread of the face, which is in the face. Bread of the face, which is in the face of Yahweh. Where you're setting this table, which kind of pictures, fellowship and communion with Yahweh. It's interesting that, again, it don't talk about the fact that there's 2 stacks of 6 loaves on the table, which is 12, which gives you the 12 tribes of Israel, right? A representation of those that would dwell with Yahweh, those that would have fellowship with Yahweh on the table. Again, I don't talk about that there, but it does give you the idea of the bread. And then when you look further and understand, what the bread is made up of, you find out, later as you go on, that there's 12 loaves and nobody eats the bread except for the priests will eat the leftover. Well, not leftover, but it's not leftover because it's not like somebody eats some and then they give the rest away. The old bread, the used up bread, because they replace it week by week. But when we look at things like what it says in, for instance, the book of John, chapter 6, verse 27, 6:27. Yeshua, who always would look back and give high frequency explanation of things from the Torah. When we look at 6:27, labor not for the meat which perishes, or that could really be translated as food. Labor not for the food which perishes, but for that meat or food which endures unto everlasting, which the Son of Man shall give unto you. For him hath Elohim the Father sealed. So again, we can look back to this food that perished, that had to be replenished week by week. But Yeshua here is saying to look for this meat or food that doesn't perish, and that which endures unto everlasting life. And then later on, he begins to talk about the bread from heaven and so forth, in terms of him being the bread from heaven, which doesn't perish, and whoever partakes of it will also not perish. So he kind of hints. Don't gotta get replaced. He kind of hints at these things where when we put the pictures together, we can see the connections that he makes. It's 4:32, so.
John?
Yeah. 31. In the meanwhile, his disciples prayed him, saying, Master, eat. But he said unto them, I have meat to eat that you know not of. Therefore said the disciples one to another, have any man brought him out to eat? Yeshua said unto them, my meat is to do the will of him that sent me and to finish his work. Okay, again, so he's right, but here we see an example of Yeshua explaining these kind of spiritual things, but he's explaining them again in a physical way, right? So when we look at these things again, yes, there is this physical thing that's being created in terms of a table and stacks of bread on the table. But again, it's supposed to give us a picture of something that is in the heavenly. So, we think about a table and the table being spread. The thing that I think about again is communion, not communion as in communion, but fellowship, I'm saying. And, that's what the tabernacle is a picture of fellowship and dwelling together, right? Yahweh literally dwelling with his people, right? So again, we see that there. And the table, again, being this picture of the perishable and the imperishable mixed together. And then also with the fact that we had these 12 loaves on it, it kind of gives you the idea of this kind of purified individuals, where you could see how that could actually be a picture of Yahweh's people. It could be a picture of Yahweh's people because of the fact that you have this kind of again, the wood and the purification of it. The other thing that is in this place here is the lampstand. The lampstand is made of pure gold. Pure gold. The lampstand, or the menorah, is the other thing that we see described here in Exodus in the holy place. Most holy place. It's the holy place. The menorah, the lampstand, there was always a light that shined in the holy place. Inside of this thing was covered up. Of course, it was the other part was open on this outside here, the outer courts, where the brazen altar was and where the laver and stuff was. We don't talk about that here, but this part was the actual tent part that was covered up, where
there's sunlight.
Right. The only light that was there was this lampstand menorah light that burned continually. They always had this 7 branch lampstand burning in the holy place, shining light on this whole situation.
And the holy of holies would be the Shekinah, the light, that cloud coming down into there, fire.
Right. The actual presence of Yahweh on the inside there.
Yes.
What you said.
How do they keep their bread good for like a week? You said
Bread will last for a week. Mommy sometimes don't throw her challah bread away and it be still sitting in there. It don't be rotten or nothing. It just don't be as soft. So they made their little loaves of bread and just put it in there. Right? It'll last for a week. They didn't do nothing special to it. Then the priest was able to have it. So it lasts even longer than a week. You'd be surprised how much natural stuff will last, with all these different with all the chemicals and stuff in it.
Food has changed since then.
But it's not something that's beyond the realm of possibility, because let us not eat that bread that mommy made in there all up and see how long it lasts. You take notice. Right? Okay, so again, we look at this idea of this light of the menorah, which actually is it's hidden light. Nobody sees the light. It's in the holy place, and only the priests that came here and did the work was the only ones who seen the light. One thing we can think about this light as representing is the fact that this light was only used for the utmost holy purposes, right? This light wasn't used for anything else but to light this place that nobody,
No regular person.
no normal, common person, saw. It's interesting because we see kind of layers of holiness with Israel, and it also shows us how it gives us a picture of the holiness of Yahweh, because when we think about the fact that in terms of Israel, Israel who was encamped all around the tabernacle, there was only one person who was able to come into this, level of holiness. Not necessarily because it included the individual's holiness, but it was more about keeping the sanctity of the holiness of the place. The individual, yes, was kind of a holy individual. He was the high priest, but in terms of his kind of individual holiness, there's no real difference between his level of cleanness or holiness and the other priests, besides the fact that he was the one that just was dedicated to be the high priest. So when we think about the ability to come into this place, the difference is that it's really trying to maintain the sanctity of the place, not necessarily mean that somebody can be clean enough or holy enough to actually make it into this place. But again, so this is the place where Yahweh dwelled, and there was only one person who was able to go into this place, and that was once a year.
And it was smoked up in there, so you couldn't even see.
Well, that brings up a thing that we see, because when we look at the putting together of what we have here in terms of what it gives here in Exodus, it talks about the building of the tabernacle, the ark, the building of the table, the building of the lampstand, and the building of the tents and the veils that cover this all up. Later on, we'll find out about the golden altar. Don't talk about the golden altar here, and where exactly that thing is. which was the thing that did provide the thing what you're talking about as far as the smoke.
They also have the little sensor that he carried too.
Right. So
I'm just saying that. I'm just saying that he can't even. He was a holy person, but he didn't really get to see it in full light.
Yeah,
That's all I was saying.
Yeah, but
it was clouded.
Saying that it's just it brings about it brings about interesting questions that can be talked about. But yeah, so yeah, you got the one person who's able to go in there and it's not unadulterated, kind of unaltered. The visibility is kind of altered when he goes in. Okay, but what we're saying is that in terms of holiness, if this is where Yahweh is, right, there's steps that have to be taken, and even in order to get to where Yahweh is, and then everybody's not even able to do it because of that, the holiness factor or the lack thereof. Right, the people brought their offerings, that was out here. So they never even was in here. Right, the people who brought their offerings, that was out in this area where the altar was.
Brazen.
The brazen altar was out here where they brought their offerings and things like that. But in here, the priest came in here and changed this out and keep this thing going. But nobody came into here. So you have that separation of holiness, which kind of gives you that idea of the holiness of Yahweh. And, it makes you think about the fact that, yes, Yeshua, whenever he died, and in the, when he died, this veil here was ripped, right? It says from top to bottom, the veil was ripped. Where, because of the thing that Yeshua has done, it talks about the fact that we're able to go before the throne of grace boldly, before the throne of grace, or the place where Yahweh dwells. But Yeshua died, it doesn't take away the fact that Yahweh is holy. Right, it doesn't take away the fact that Yahweh is holy. The tearing of the partition, the tearing of the veil that separates Yahweh from his people, wasn't a tearing away of the necessity for holiness. And I think that
we were covered by what Yeshua did, which made us holy, or could make you holy, as you said.
Right. I think that there is kind of it just seems as there's a huge misconception on what it is that really happened when that thing happened in terms of the ripping of the veil. Right? How we don't think about necessarily everything that went into the tabernacle and all that it represents. And then when it comes to, our life and dwelling with Yahweh inside of our life, the aspect of holiness is not, put at the forefront, where there wasn't no misconception on the holiness of Yahweh. Like, you can't even get into this place here as being just a regular old person, because your holiness factor wasn't up to par, right? Your holiness factor was like on a 3 or a 4, when in order to be up here, it got to be all the way at 10, right? And then even that, it had you as the high priest, even as being the high priest, you still had to do things in order to make yourself ready to be able to go in. So when we think about all of these pictures that are being created for us through the tabernacle, through the this pattern that was given to Moses, having this specific understanding of what the heavenlies contain. We can't think that Yahweh has removed the idea of holiness, right? It just doesn't necessarily look the way that it looked there.
Well, because we're not. I think that in the wilderness, even when you look at it coming down to the, I think that's in the book of Numbers, where you see how the camps were set up, and how the Levites surrounded the tabernacle.
Yeah. And
how you had, all the rest of the Israelites was on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
So you had the world on the outside, and you had the regular Israelites, and you had the Levites surrounding the tabernacle, and then you had the tabernacle. So it's like there's a buffer. You know what I mean? And then you have not even, in order to get to this the tent, there's a courtyard that with fences that are high up around it. It's kind of like it's all being blocked in. You know what I mean? And so you can't. I think that people don't have the idea of what holiness means, and that's why they think that anyone can just come in and do whatever.
Just any kind of way. Did it for you. That's a good thing to think about, because when you think about how the tabernacle was set up, it was in the midst of the people. The people was all around the tabernacle, and
the tent.
When you think about it in that way, it replicates this idea of the closer in you get, the more holy it is, right? So because you have the most holy place, you got the holy place, and then you got the courtyard. That's out here, and then outside of that you have the priests, and then outside of that you have the people, and then outside of the people, then you have the rest of the world, right? So when you think about holiness, it's either whichever way you're going. I guess it gets progressively more holy, or working in, and less holy working out. When you had people who had the different uncleannesses and so on and so forth, they went out of where the people was. So if the people say was here, this was the extension of where the people was. That's the extension of the least amount of holiness, right? So then you had to be outside of that. If you say, like, if you had, the lepers had to go out there, or, even, you had any type of illnesses or what have you, when you went outside of the camp. Or if you was banished or whatever, you got put outside of the camp. So again, this idea of holiness is something that is important. So we look at the menorah, which is this light, right? This light that is within. This light that is within, that is forever burning. When we think about the fact that what Yeshua has to say, let's look at what Yeshua says in John chapter 8. Because when we think about the light, which is the presence of Yahweh in us, it's an internal light. It is an internal light, like the menorah. But the thing that it represents, which is that purity, which is that holiness, is something that even though it's a light that is within, that light is to be manifest through us to the world. So chapter 8 of John, verse 12, and Yeshua spake. Then spake Yeshua again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. Okay, so we look at the menorah, which is again that pure gold, which is something that we can connect directly with Yeshua. There's no wood in it, right? It's just pure gold. And it is that internal light. But even though it is internal light, it's still light, right? So light is that thing that eradicates darkness. So when we think about Yeshua being the light of the world, right? He is the one that would be that which eradicates darkness. And if we follow him, right, we don't walk in darkness. We have this light of life, who is Yeshua. I thought about the fact that light doesn't know how to differentiate and shine on, some darkness here and no darkness there. If I'm in a dark place and I light a light, everything in that dark place that light is going to touch, regardless of, it don't discriminate, it don't differentiate light. Type of obstruction that blocks the light, there's nothing that can stop light from touching any darkness, unless you cover it, like what we have here with the veils and so on and so forth. So when you think about being the light of the world, when we think about what Yeshua has done in terms of removing we think about what Yeshua has done in terms of removing the coverings here, removing the veils, removing the things that inhibit the light, which is this covering. You can think about how things were, but things aren't exactly like they were anymore. When we look at what Yeshua came to do, he came really to expand on these things that were shown to us only in part, only in pictures, with the tabernacle, right? Because there was kind of a separation. There was a differentiation, a separation from the people. It dwelled, the presence dwelled in the midst of the people, but there still was a separation. You couldn't go here, right? But now, because of what Yeshua has done, he has made access to the presence of Yahweh. Not taking away from the holiness, but so we have to be able to learn the lessons of holiness and set apartness from the tabernacle. But yet and still now, because of what Yeshua has done, he's made a way to come actually into the presence of Yahweh. Still, not doing away with holiness, but providing that level of holiness and set apartness for all those that through Yeshua. I think Ephesians calls us the children. Hold on, what does it say in Ephesians? Ephesians. Um, Ephesians 5. Ephesians 5:8. What does that say? For you were sometimes darkness. You were sometimes darkness, but now you lights to walk as children of light. Right, so now we are children of light, vessels emanating the light of Yeshua, which again is represented by the menorah, the light that burned continually.
Okay.
Oh, we're
So you're
back.
back.
Okay, something happened with our connection. Came back now. All right, so let's just keep on going then. I wanted to didn't have much to say about the tents. Only that again, it just shows the different layers of separation. Some people talk about the porpoise skin or badger skin or whatever that is that it uses to to use as a covering for the tent, as it being this unclean thing. I guess you're not eating it. You're not eating the thing or using it as a covering for the tent, but I guess still it is the idea of using this unclean thing to cover the place where Yahweh dwells. But I guess at the end of the day, it gives you a picture of what we see with us in general, as no matter, even now, it's a process for us now to, in this flesh, to attain purity or holiness. Yahweh looks at us because of what Yahweh has done, what Yeshua has done for us, and regards us as holy. And if we're walking in that way, he continues to do so, but yet we're still in this flesh, which, we have to continually fight and strive for holiness, right? So I'm saying all that just to say we're in this body, which is a body that is dying and decaying and is inherently unclean. If you want to talk about clean and unclean, human beings, you can't eat humans, right? Right? So I'm just saying, when we look at the idea of this porpoise or this badger or this thing that is considered to be unclean, as used in the making of the tabernacle, it just gives a picture of the fact that essentially the place where Yahweh dwells here with us, it does touch uncleanness. Okay, so I wanted to just go ahead and look at some things in Isaiah.
Okay.
Moving forward.
66. I just gave him Isaiah 66.
Over there? Actually.
A little bit in Isaiah, a little bit in Hebrews. I actually read some of this last week in the context of
The Beatitudes.
Yeah, Beatitudes. Hebrews, Isaiah, Yeshayahu, chapter 66. Continuing on with the idea of holiness and this desire, this need to have this set apartness. Can you just start reading 66?
I'm going to start reading out verse 1.
Yeah.
Thus says Yahweh, heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where then is a house you could build for me? And where is a place that I may rest? For my hand made all these things. Thus, all these things came into being, declares Yahweh. But to this one I will look, to him who is humble and contrite of spirit, and who trembles at my word. But he who kills an ox is like one who slays a man. He who sacrifices a lamb is like one who breaks a dog's neck. He who offers a grain offering is like one who offers swine's blood. He who burns incense is like the one who blesses an idol. As they have chosen their own ways, and their soul delights in their abominations, so I will choose their punishments, and I will bring on them what they dread. Because I called, but no one answered. I spoke, but they did not listen. And they did evil in my sight, and chose that in which I did not delight. Hear the word of Yahweh, you who tremble at his word. Your brothers who hate you, who exclude you for my name's sake, have said, let Yahweh be glorified, that we may see your joy. And they will be put to shame. A voice of uproar from the city, a voice from the temple, the voice of Yahweh, who is rendering recompense to his enemies. Before she travailed, she brought forth. Before her pain came, she gave birth to a boy. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Can a land be born in one day? Can a nation be brought forth all at once? As soon as Zion travailed, she also brought forth her son. Shall I bring to the point of birth and not give delivery, says Yah? Or shall I who gives delivery shut the womb, says your Elohim? Be joyful with Jerusalem and rejoice for her, all you who love her. Be exceedingly glad with her, all you who mourn over her, that you may nurse and be satisfied with her comforting breasts, that you may suck and be delighted with her bountiful bosom. For thus says Yahweh, behold, I extend peace to her like a river, and the glory of the nations like an overflowing stream. And you shall be nursed, you shall be carried on the hip and fondled on the knee. As one whom his mother comforts, so I will comfort you. And you shall be comforted in Jerusalem. This, and your heart shall be glad, and your bones shall flourish like the new grass. And the hand of Yahweh shall be made known to his servants. But he shall be indignant toward his enemies.
All right, that's good right there. Okay, so when we look at this, and it keeps on going on in that vein, when we look at, first it starts talking about the fact that Yahweh made the heaven is his throne, it says in verse 1. The earth is his footstool. Where can the house be for him? And then it gets back to the verse that we was looking at last week in verse 2. For all those things hath mine hand made, and all those things have been, says Yahweh. But to this man will I look, even to him that is poor and of a contrite spirit, and trembles at my word. And it repeats that again, verse 5. Hear the word of Yahweh, you that tremble at his word. Those that are affected by the word of Yahweh, that tremble, that have that fear of Yahweh, that understanding of Yahweh and who he is, and a desire based on that fear to follow after him. Understanding who Yahweh is and knowing that Yahweh as creator and sustainer of all things indeed knows what is the way that we should live in this life. That really is the beginning of this life, is just understanding who Yahweh is and having that fear of Yahweh and living your life based on the fact that you know that Yahweh, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is the creator of all things. And he desires for us to be, as it says right here, to have this poor and contrite spirit, to not be proud in and of ourselves, to think that we are the ones in control of, our situation.
Yeah.
Understanding that he is the one that's in control. There's a way that he will have for us to be. And that way includes holiness. Right? That way includes this set apartness. Right? So he goes through and, we look at, the ways of Israel and what happened with the people and how the people, go astray and ended up getting to the place where they're just doing things. They're just doing things, but it's not from the heart. Like when we look back at in Exodus, where Yahweh wanted for these offerings, for these sacrifices to be from the heart, not just doing these things, right? So the people, got to the place where they're, and Yahweh's looking at their offerings and their sacrifices. You're killing this ox, but you might as well just have murdered a man, right? That's how he's looking at it. He's not really care about these steps that you're going through, right? Because your heart is not there, right? You're not someone who's really trembling at the word of Yahweh. You're just kind of going through these motions and doing these things. We're able to see that, of course, Yahweh still has a heart for his people. He still, yes, does have a heart for his people. It becomes necessary to bring about a way, as it always was necessary. It becomes necessary to bring about a way to get to this place of dwelling with Yahweh that's outside of our strength, power, and ability, because it always ends up being that people just end up just doing things, just doing actions and fulfilling deeds, and it not being motivated from that internal light, right? And the motivation is not from this internal light, which of course is a picture of Yeshua. The motivation is just, within us. And because of the fact that we really are these individuals that have fallen because of sin, it was always necessary then for us to actually be changed and transformed on the inside, for that internal light to be placed on the inside of us, so that we can get to that inner place, that inner place of communion and relationship with Yahweh. Again, we talked about this last week in terms of this contrite spirit and this poor and contrite spirit. For this truly to be achieved, we're talking about a result of a relationship with Yeshua, a result of authentically experiencing salvation through the work of Yeshua, through our faith in Yeshua and what he has done for us. Transformative experience that happens as a result of it. So again, when we look at this, talking about this poor and contrite spirit, us naturally, from our our natural self wants to rise up, wants to do all the things that are comfortable, for our own selves, all the things that make us feel good, all the things that bring us, that personal pleasure, which is the exact opposite of this here poor and contrite spirit. So again, to actually achieve this place, that is the place where Yahweh is going to rest. To actually achieve this is to actually accept Yeshua into your life and allow him to change and transform you, and to cause that spirit to be poor and contrite, and to create this place for a nourishing relationship with the Almighty to flourish and grow. Okay, so without staying over,
I don't see this process, I would say, within the greater part of people who are coming in the truth.
What do you mean?
I mean, I just see, I guess just recently, maybe, the more recent people coming in, it seems like instead of them getting this nourishing effect, they get an anger effect.
Yeah.
And then the men mess up their family effect.
Yeah. Well, knowledge puffs up, right?
The whole like comforting, and I guess it might be to him who is humble and contrite a spirit, and he trembles at my word, which means the word changes you. I don't know.
Well,
maybe that's the problem.
I think the point is that when you're not saying that, you're not saying it because it didn't ever happen, right? So you have a lot of people who gain information about Yeshua and the Most High, and even now you have a lot of these people who gain a lot of information about physical things. Where it causes you to feel away.
That's your carnal reaction.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's your carnal mind. So if I'm gaining information that causes me to feel good about myself and be lifted up and built up within myself, it's really causing the opposite of what needs to happen. If I'm supposed to have a poor and contrite spirit, but yet this thing that I'm gaining is actually lifting me up and building me up, it's having the wrong effect. The wrong effect is happening because it's not the thing that's supposed to be looked for here. And this is the problem. When you look at a lot of these people out here, be walking in this walk, but you know a tree by its fruits, right? If I'm somebody who, and the thing that I manifest most is hatred and resentment,
just not even that,
or things that don't kind of exemplify the character of Yahweh, then you have to look at those things and call it what it is. A tree by its fruits.
Stop arguing.
you know, if I, because of the truth that I found, destroy my family situation, in the name of Yeshua, how does that exemplify Yeshua? And I don't mean like my external family. Like I'm talking about my actual, like
Your wife,
if I'm a husband, like my wife and children family. It's different to talk about, for instance, you know, your brothers and your mothers and so on and so forth, kind of your external family, right? But your immediate family, your wife and your children, it's something that should be built up, right? But we got a lot of people out here who are really breaking down their immediate family structure behind right, behind the truth.
And the wife is in the faith. Like she's not it's just it's that
The thing about it is that we have to be able to get to a place where this is more than just information. Right? This has to get to a place where this is really about a life being led by internal light, by the menorah. So a life that's being led by internal light. External light shining on you can only lead you but so far. But until that light is inside of you, until that light gets inside of the tabernacle and begins to shine internally, that's when the motivation changes and it becomes actually a result of your relationship instead of you just doing things. There's a lot of people out here just doing things because they found out that they was Israelites and so they're supposed to do this thing or that thing. But at the end of the day, there has to be this internal light. There has to be this internal light, which is Yeshua, on the inside of you that actually is lit and, burns on the inside of you and exacts change in you, right? So, yeah, there's a lot of people that are walking around here and they're just doing things and wearing this and, speaking these particular words, right? And all of that. But at the end of the day, there's no internal light. And there's been no internal transformation that has happened. And at the end of the day, Yahweh's tabernacle, just like it was in the beginning, so shall it be in the end. Not talking about a tent with fine linen, veils covering it up, but individuals, where the spirit, the presence of Yahweh actually dwells on the inside of you. When that spirit's inside of you, it causes you to be changed. It causes you to be the way that Yahweh would have for you to be. And this is the thing that we have to be able to understand and be able to see and recognize in these people who are out here, professing to be the way. When we look at Hebrews, it brings up some interesting things as to where there is a distinction. There is a distinction between the old and new covenant. There is a distinction that's between the old and new covenant as to where, there are things that we're not necessarily doing that was being done prior, and why. And it even gets into the why of it all, and it gets into what this actually should be and what it should look like. So if we look at Hebrews chapter 9, when we look at verses 1 through 5, it kind of gives you kind of a breakdown as to what you're looking at in terms of the tabernacle. Starting off, then verily the first covenant had also ordinances of divine service and a worldly sanctuary. For there was a tabernacle made, the first, wherein was the candlestick. The first, talking about the first room in the tabernacle, which again will be this holy place here. Wherein the table of showbread, which is called the sanctuary. And after the second veil, the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all, talking about in here, which had the golden censer, which we didn't talk about the golden censer in Exodus. It's not mentioned in Exodus, it's mentioned later on. And the Ark of the Covenant, overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot that had manna. Oh, and it's talking about what was actually inside of the ark. Had the manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant, and over the cherubims of glory, shadowing the mercy seat, of which we cannot now speak particularly. Verse 6, now when these things were thus ordained, the priest went always into the first tabernacle, accomplishing the service of Elohim, but into the second went the high priest only once every year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the heirs of the people. Again, we talked about that in terms of the Day of Atonement, the high priest who went once a year into the Holy of Holies, into here once a year, but he didn't go in without taking care of his own sin sacrifice first. Verse 8, the Holy Spirit, this signified that the way into the holiest of all was not yet made manifest, while the first tabernacle was yet standing, which was a figure of the time then present, in which were offered both gifts and sacrifices that could not make him that did the service perfect. Talking about the fact that the priest was doing these things. It didn't never make him perfect. It just caused him to be accepted by Yahweh, because he's filling the requirements that Yahweh had put forth and made. Right? They could not make him feed his service perfect as pertaining to the conscience. It never did anything for him internally. The priest, whenever he did this, it never made a light come on inside of him. Right? It never caused him to be led by this internal light. It just was him doing these things, which was just an external picture of something that was more to come. Right? Which, verse 10, which stood only in meats and drinks and diverse washings and carnal ordinances imposed on them until the time of Reformation. Right? As if to say that they were doing these things, doing all of these things for a time. There was a timetable set on the old covenant. There was a timetable set on the old covenant in terms of the acts and deeds that went along with these sacrifices and these ordinances and these various washings and so on and so forth. verse 11. But Messiah, being come a high priest of good things to come by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood he entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. So here it talks about this place that Yahshua, that Messiah went, this greater and more perfect tabernacle that Yeshua went into, that wasn't made by hands, right? And that he took in not the blood of goats and calves, but his own blood. By his own blood, he entered into this place once and for all. Okay, so we see in verse 13, for if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of and heifer sprinkling the unclean sanctified to the purifying of the flesh, going through these things did indeed serve as a purification of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offer himself without spot to Elohim, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living Elohim. Right? So the lost statutes and commandments that we look to and follow here to go through these different things, these various cleansings and purifications that the scripture does indeed does do something for the flesh. It does give you a purity or a cleanness according to the flesh, but again, it wasn't able to, the service did not perfect your conscience. But now this thing that Yeshua has done changes you internally, right? It changes you internally and provides you with this light, this internal light that shines from within, as opposed to the external light. So this is the thing that Yeshua provides for us. Okay, so for their verse 16, for where a testament is, there must also a necessity be death for the testator. For a testament is of force after, it says here in verse, after men are dead, otherwise it is no strength at all while the tester lives. In the Greek, actually, there is no men here. In the Greek, men is something that is inserted. The idea here is that there is death involved in the sealing of the covenant. There's death involved, necessity, the death of the testament. What does it say in the, what verse is that? 16.
American Standard.
For where a covenant is, there must be of necessity be the death of the one. Even still, even there, when you look in the Greek text in terms of, the idea is that there is death involved in the making of the covenant, not necessarily the one who's making it is dying, right? Because we had the old covenant. We look at the old covenant, there's death involved in the making of the covenants, but not necessarily a dying of those that are making the covenant. In other words, what is actually sealing the covenant is that blood that's being shed. So we see with the old covenant, there is a continual process of blood being shed, as part of this covenant. But what we see with what Yeshua has done, it goes on to talk about that in verse 18. While whereupon neither the first testament was dedicated without blood. It wasn't without blood. In fact, it was with blood, right? For when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled blood, sprinkled both the book and all the people. There was always blood involved. There was always a death involved. In other words, for life, there was always a giving of life for life. Saying that this is the blood of the testament which Elohim hath enjoined unto you. Moreover, the sprinkling with blood, both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry, and also all the things that are by law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood, there is no remission. Right? Talking about what was going on with the old covenant in terms of there always needing to be this blood continually shed over and over again to maintain this covenantal balance and substitutionary expiation that needed to go on within the covenant. Verse 23, it was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these. So looking back to when we talk about patterns again, where what we saw was a pattern of the heavenlies, pattern of the things that are in the heavenlies. Verse 23, it was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. So the patterns that were created, Moses got the patterns. Moses got that physical representation of this spiritual understanding from Yahweh, and made those the tabernacle, and made all of the things, and then those things needed to be purified with these physical things, but it was only a picture of the spiritual, right? So, but the heavenly things needed to be purified with better sacrifices than the old. For Messiah is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the truth, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of Elohim for us. So the writer of Hebrews is basically showing you that the thing that the priest was doing in the pattern that Moses got was a picture of the heavenlies, and the thing that Yeshua has done for us is the actual spiritual version of what we've already seen go on with the priests and the pattern of the tabernacles, that we look at and see back in Exodus. So it's showing us that the thing that the high priest did, that's what Yeshua has did. Except the difference is what Yeshua has done is able to cleanse our conscience. It's able to actually transform us from the inside. It's actually able to place this light on the inside of us and give us that internal light and give us the ability for Yahweh's presence to actually dwell in us. So the thing that Yeshua did for us in the heavenly tabernacle is really the manifestation of what we saw in the physical with the tabernacle as it was shown to us from old. Verse 25, not nor yet that he should offer himself often, as a high priest entered into the holy place every year with blood of others, for then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now once in the end of the world hath appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And as it is appointed upon men once to die, but after this the judgment, so Messiah was offered to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. So we see that again, what Yeshua did was the same thing that the priest did in the physical, Yeshua did in the spiritual, in terms of going into the most holy place. But we're talking about the most holy place in the heavenlies, to go before the mercy seat and receive that forgiveness and that placation of the wrath of Yahweh for all sin. Once and for all. Again, after the pattern of the heavens. Right? So again, we don't necessarily know if, and I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, I wouldn't say that in the heavenlies there are necessarily these two rooms, right? Because the heavens of heavens can contain Yahweh, right? So we're not going to say that there's like these two rooms in the heavenlies, but this represents the fact that there is a type of separation. There is a type of separation, and whatever that type of separation it is, Yeshua, in the sacrifice that he made, takes the blood that he shed into the innermost place of the heavens, where Yahweh is, and he made the atonement for the sins of mankind once and for all, for us to be able to now have that relationship with Yahweh ourselves without having to go through this series of men in order to be with Yahweh, but we're able to go and be with Yahweh ourselves on an individual level, still through holiness, but now we're talking about, instead of like this corporate thing, it is now made available to us as individuals to be changed, to do more than what the old covenant did, in terms of just going through the prescribed motions that Yahweh did create, but that were only as a picture to show us the fulfillment of those things, which is the new covenant, which actually changes our conscience, changes our heart internally, and gives us that internal light that brings us into right relationship with Yahweh. Okay, so that being said, if there's any questions or comments, we're going to go ahead and be done talking about this for now. There's much more to talk about in terms of the tabernacle. There's a few more chapters in Exodus dealing with the various parts, so there's always more to look and see in terms of the tabernacle and how it relates to Yeshua and what he has done for us. Okay, so that being said, we will say shalom. Stop this.